All right, before we just finish with our discussion of cancer, I do want to go over briefly some of the causes and prevention of cancer. One of the first causes that we're going to talk about is the hereditary cause. Now, I know there's a lot of alphabet soup on this page, so it just looks like a random assortment of letters and numbers. I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of these. I just want you to understand that there is an inheritable quality of certain cancers. So for example, the BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene, these are genes that have two variations, specifically the 1 and 2 variations. These are going to make individuals a little bit more susceptible to breast cancer. Does not mean that they're necessarily going to get it. Does not mean that everybody who has breast cancer has these two genes. However, they are variations, they are alleles of a particular gene that do make it a little bit more likely that the individual will develop breast cancer. These are going to be tumor suppressor genes, and these are just allelic variations that have some mutations with them. In this case, both copies of these genes would need to be mutated before the predisposition to cancer is increased. So just because you have one gene, you would really need to have both genes present before you're even more susceptible to breast cancer. So you would need both of them. The RB gene is a tumor suppressor gene as well. This is responsible for causing retinoblastoma. Retinoblastoma is a pretty rare eye cancer that occurs in childhood. Retinoblastoma affecting a single eye would be treated by the removal of the eye. Total removal of the eye is likely to result in a cure. So just for an example, my husband had as a child retinoblastoma. It did spread to both eyes. So he had it in one eye and then he had a tumor in the other eye. Since they didn't want him to lose vision completely, they removed the eye that had the largest tumor and froze the tumor in the other eye. So one eye was removed and then the other eye was simply frozen. That caused some of the issues with the frozen pupil, which we discussed in an earlier chapter. So that is retinoblastoma. Now, he had retinoblastoma. However, one of the very first things they did is when he was younger, when he was first diagnosed, is they tested him for a genetic predisposition to retinoblastoma, and he did not have it. So although he had the retinoblastoma, he does not have the RB gene that is responsible for it. So he does not have a genetic predisposition for it, and he does not have the chance of passing it on genetically. I mean, of course, it's still possible that our children could have it, but they would not have received it as genetic inheritance necessarily. Another example would be an abnormal RET gene, which predisposes an individual to thyroid cancer that can be passed down from parent to child. RET is a proto-oncogene. Only one mutation is needed to increase a predisposition to cancer. The rest of the mutations necessary for thyroid cancer to develop are going to be acquired and not really inherited. So there are the heredity is still relatively unknown. As we're studying cancers, as we're learning more and more about them, we're starting to learn more about the inheritable aspects of them. But it is just something to keep in mind. One thing that we do know quite a bit more about would be environmental carcinogens. So things in your environment that can induce or cause cancer. We have a couple of terms here. A mutagen is simply any agent that causes mutations. A carcinogen is a chemical that causes cancer by being mutagenic. So if you see that term, carcinogenic, it specifically refers to cancer causing. Mutagenic simply means that it causes mutations. Those mutations could eventually become carcinogens. It's kind of like how all squares are rectangles, not all rectangles are squares. All carcinogens are mutagens, not all mutagens are carcinogens. Some cause only an initiation, but others can cause initiation and promotion of that tumors. Heredity can predispose a person to cancer, but whether or not it develops is going to depend largely on environmental mutagens and what they're going to be exposed throughout the course of their life. Another sort of environmental hazard would be radiation. Radiation can cause mutations. Those mutations, if they are the right mutations at the right time, can lead to the formation of cancer. So radiation can be found in radon gas, nuclear fuel, X-rays. Ultraviolet light can also cause mutations, so too much exposure to the sun can lead to skin cancer. Just because that's the nature of this chapter, we'll just keep sharing. But in my family, we do have a family history of melanoma. Melanoma is one of the most dangerous forms of skin cancer. So since we have a family history of that, both my mom and my brother are highly susceptible to the formation of moles. They get checked out regularly. I think it's almost every 2 years they have to go and see a dermatologist about the new and bizarre moles that keep cropping up, most of which just have to be removed. So anyway, that's something to be concerned about. Oh, because of that, I grew up in a family that was very concerned about overexposure to the sun. So I grew up wearing lots and lots of sunscreen. Organic chemicals are also a major concern. Things like tobacco smoke can contain organic chemicals that are known mutagens. The greater the exposure, the more likely that cancer will develop. So you don't have to be a smoker yourself. You can get cancer from secondhand smoke, from just being exposed to it over the course of time. 80% of all cancers are going to be related to the use of tobacco products, whether it's mouth cancer, oral cancer, lung cancer. Most cancers are going to be linked back to tobacco. When smoking is combined with drinking alcohol, those risks of cancers can increase even greater. Passive smoking, so inhalation of someone else's smoke, is also dangerous. And the reason that I kind of want to talk about how tobacco smoke can be so dangerous, tobacco smoke goes directly into your lungs. You've got organic chemicals that are being processed directly into your lungs. And the reason why we care about lungs so much is, as we've already talked about, lungs are they're the cross point between the respiratory system and the circulatory system. If you have cancer developing in your lungs, it's massively covered by the circulatory system, and from there, if it can get into circulation, it can go anywhere in the body. You're also going to see it frequently end up at the liver. The liver is responsible for detoxifying, so the liver is going to be responsible for cleaning out the blood, and it's also going to be, the liver and kidneys are both another checkpoint or a cross point between the urinary system, the digestive system, and the circulatory system. So we are going to see that cancer that started in the lungs may end up in the liver. Cancer that started in the liver may end up in the lungs. So this is why smoking and alcohol are not a great combination. So those are organic chemicals like tobacco, but there are also pollutants. So pollutants like metals, dust, chemicals, pesticides, all of those can increase the risk of cancer. Just as an example, we've got asbestos, nickel, radon, vinyl chloride, benzene. All of those are known carcinogens. So if you find yourself working in an environment that's around those or near those, please make sure that you're taking the proper safety precautions and following all OSHA regulations to make sure that you are not putting yourself at unnecessary risk. There are also things like viruses that can cause cancer. There is a vaccine available for hepatitis A and B, both of which are responsible for causing liver cancer. HPVs, the human papilloma viruses, they cause cervical cancers. Fortunately, there's a vaccine for that as well. The Epstein-Barr virus causes the nasopharyngeal cancer. The retrovirus, HTLV1, can cause hairy cell leukemia. HIV is a virus that causes AIDS. Kaposi sarcoma associated herpes virus are responsible for the Kaposi sarcoma and certain lymphomas. So basically what's happening, the reason why viruses can lead to cancers is that viruses, one, they operate by injecting their DNA into your cells and allowing your cells to replicate for them. If they can override your DNA, if they can override your system to replicate more viruses, you can also override your system to shut down your, to remove your controls of the cell cycle. They can cause your cells to continue to replicate out of control. But they also suppress your immune system. Your immune system is incredible. As we've kind of already talked about, your immune system is responsible for not only fighting off foreign invaders, but also for targeting cancer cells. Your immune system is pretty good at this. So even if one cell is replicating out of control, typically the body can find it and shut it down. So it's important to keep the body as healthy as possible. But when you suppress your immune system through a viral infection, you're exposing yourself to a pretty severe risk of cancer. Dietary choices. Dietary choices are interesting one because we don't often think of them being related to cancer. But there are certain things like a high-fat diet and obesity can cause breast and prostate cancer. It's really just very important to make sure that you're getting a well-balanced meal of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, getting a regular amount of exercise. Really, all of this is just about keeping your machine healthy and running as smoothly as possible. Like we said, your immune system is pretty incredible, but there are a lot of things that can affect your immune system, a lot of things that can bring your immune system down and keep you from functioning at your best. So really, one of the best things you can do is make sure that your machine is fueled properly, that you're putting good food in, and that you're keeping it running regularly with exercise. So those are some very important factors that can help reduce the risk of cancers. All right, so you should be able to at least talk about what we mean when we say that cancer has a hereditary component. Not all cancers are hereditary, but there are some cancers that are linked to sort of a likelihood, a susceptibility associated with certain genes. You should also be able to list the environmental carcinogens that are known to play a role in the development of cancer and discuss some of the proactive steps you can take to help reduce your risk of cancer. All right, and as always, please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.